Okay, good morning everyone. Sorry for the delay. I'll still try to finish pretty much right around on time so that things don't get totally out of control for every other workshop for the rest of the day. So this workshop is called From Farm to Farm School. And the point of, I guess, the workshop was when I had originally spoke to Leah and Cindy about what they were looking for in some of the workshops. I told them a little bit about my background, and I told them a little bit about my experiences on farms, and also my experience as coordinating education on farms, and wanted to just do a little workshop, I guess, a little more like a presentation about options farmers have and things for interns to consider, and about how doing apprenticeships, doing internships, volunteering on farms is kind of changing a lot. There's obviously a big growth in people who are wanting to work on farms, and they are attracted to farms who show a serious interest in actually willing to train people, and that there's a large kind of scale to that. Who here has ever kind of gone and volunteered or apprenticed on a farm? What was the experience like for you when you went?
It was great.
Yeah?
Yeah, awesome. Learned so much. It was such a rapid learning curve. And yeah, it was a struggle at first, the hours and the manning. My farmer drank a little too much coffee for my liking.
Were they hands-on quite a bit with you?
Oh yeah.
That's awesome.
She never would give me all of her secrets.
Yeah.
She never gave me the tomato fertilizer recipe.
Okay, that's strange. That seems like an easy secret to give out, unless you're like her competition or something. But that's really good. That's good to hear actually as the first person, because I know that I've definitely been on farms where the person's like, there's an acre of weeds back there. Have fun. See you on Friday. Yeah. Who else here has had experience being kind of an intern or a volunteer on a farm doing woofing? Anyone else? What has your experience has been like overall, kind of what?
Oh, excellent. I'm just helping Gary Swan out.
Oh, okay, right now.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Really good learning about biodynamic techniques and gardening.
Quite a bit of hands-on kind of?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Just spend the morning there helping with whatever you're doing.
Has anyone here hosted interns or apprentices or anything on their garden or farms? And how has that experience been for you? Did you try to model it after your first learning experiences?
Yeah, well, I learned a lot how not to do it.
Yeah.
With my experience, definitely. And I was working with up to several, like 4 or 5 apprentices at once.
Okay.
And at the same time, we have a half a dozen volunteers. So it gets a bit hectic, so you really have to be organized. You have to do a lot of work setting it up and who's going to be responsible for what. So as much as you can be organized, it's really going to pay off, especially in the numbers,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, great. So if anyone has any questions while I'm going through this, absolutely feel free to ask me or to stop me while I'm doing it. Okay, so a little bit about myself. My first experience in, I guess, farming came pretty late in life. I was 25 at the time when I first basically did any sort of work on a farm. It was in Newfoundland, and it was, I think it was maybe a 5-acre farm. It was very specific kind of growing conditions there, probably not that much different than being here. A lot of excellent salad greens. And so I did woofing there. I did some woofing in Ontario. And eventually I decided to go to school, and I attended Concordia University in Montreal for geography. As part of doing that, there is a pretty well respected and well-known program there called the Concordia Greenhouse Project, and it sort of acts as a mini urban kind of farming hub. And while I was working there as an education coordinator, so I was putting on programming in the greenhouse, workshops, speaker series, things along these lines, the group of people that were working on it decided to create a full-on 8-month-long urban farming school. And so I was part of a group of people who founded this school in Montreal, and this is in 2010. And so we had put on some conferences about how universities and communities can engage to further enhance urban agriculture. This led to, in the first year, it was just a 5-day class. And after that first year, we thought, it's great to have a 5-day course on urban agriculture, but what people really need to do is get really their hands in there and actually see an entire growing season. So we ended up creating an entire program based around this, which I'll talk about in my next slide. So it's a city farm program there. That led to me actually working for the English Montreal School Board, and I became the environmental education advisor for them for 3 years before moving out here. And so I was an educator with after-school programs called the Green Club. And so I was teaching them about anything you can think of to do with the environment. It was really open-ended. I had a lot of freedom for what I wanted to do. And one of the most cool aspects were building school gardens at a number of schools. By the time I left, we had 15 different school gardens within the city, which was kind of an unprecedented thing. In terms of the French school board and the English school board, the French school board had 2 or something, or 1. So I was really lucky to be able to work on that project with a lot of support from my boss at the time, and I was part of the Green Committee for the English Montreal School Board, which kind of offered funding to different schools and stuff along those lines. So this picture is from actually out at the City Farm School project, which was based on campus and was pretty small. It was maybe about altogether under an acre, 3/4 of an acre. And since arriving out here, I arrived just in the summer in Port Alberni. I moved out here following my partner, and I am now starting a small scale little farm. And I've been working for Transition Towns Society in Port Alberni, and I'm currently a food hub coordinator, which is part of Island Health, and so trying to increase food security and kind of the overarching themes that come with that has been what I've been working on. So the City Farm School was my real introduction into gardening and farming and the education that comes with it. Hi there. Over the course of the 5 years, I worked with over 100 different students. We offered internships in different areas in the city, including school gardens. So I had interns from the City Farm School actually working with me in the school gardens, helping to build and establish different gardens. The interns also worked in the community with different organizations. They were all obligated to offer free workshops as part of it. The way the training went was each month we would bring in a different farmer to the campus who would come and give a workshop on whatever their expertise was. So this one was a kind of a permaculture-based one, and so it was all about fruit trees. And so that was a workshop that we did. We were really lucky in Quebec. There was some very kind of exciting farmers at that time. So I don't know if you follow much, but like Jean-Martin Fortier, who wrote The Market Gardener, was teaching with us like 4 years ago, and before the book came out. And we had Curtis Stone come a number of times to teach kind of more intensive stuff, and Dan Brisebois, who ran the Canadian Organic Growers Association for a number of years. So we had these really amazing farmers come because there was such a kind of a hype in the urban agriculture scene at that time, which was really interesting because I was having almost no knowledge of what was going on in rural agriculture because I was just in the city and I'd been there 7 or 8 years at that point. So yeah, that's a little bit about the project. And through doing that project, I really felt as though I started to understand what it is that people are looking for in the city, where most of our population is now in 2016, what they're kind of interested in, what they're looking for in education, and what they want to do, and how a lot of these people actually did want to be in the rural setting, teaching, being taught, but they also wanted to have their job, and they wanted to be close to maybe their partners, or and so that's why the urban agriculture was really exciting, because it was something that was only 2 days a week, and they could go home on the bus after or bike home. So it kind of was interesting, and it tried to model it, and a lot of people that went through the program actually ended up going out and starting their own projects, starting their own farms and different things along those lines, and working for food depots and things to this nature, and becoming educators. And one of the people who took it in the very first year ended up working with me and then became the coordinator after the point of when I left. So anyways, that's just a little bit about myself and so.
Was this at a university?
Yeah, it was based out of a university, but you didn't have to be a university student. It was completely open to anyone who wanted to take it. It had a certain cost at the time. I think it was like $450.
So it's like a
Take it.
continuing education thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Which university?
Concordia University.
Concordia, oh,
Yeah.
good place.
Yeah, so it was just, there was a set program and they had to give a certain amount of time. The way that it was structured was that there was this large this mini scale farm that was out there, just vegetables, and then kind of a permaculture aspect. But then what we also did is we gave them their own individual plots that they had to work and plan in groups. And so that was part of their whole curriculum, was in the very beginning. They had to, in a group, collectively decide what plants they wanted to plant. They had to start them in the greenhouse. We had a huge rooftop greenhouse, and so they were part of this whole production. We would raise 10,000 seedlings in the greenhouse, sell them to help fund the project, and yeah, it was kind of this big thing. And then they would get, they'd have to come every week and they would have to help out on the farm, plus they'd have time for their plot, and we had a market stand from some of the stuff that we grew there. But it was small, we would sell a few $100s, twice a week or something. Like, it wasn't too big, it wasn't a big thing. We didn't push it, but a lot of the faculty would come through and neighbors and stuff. So in my experience and through discussions with many of the farmers around that time, I realized that interns tend to be a lot more valuable than volunteers for farmers. Volunteers are coming, with farmers, they don't always feel as though they're coming out on the winning end of these relationships, is one thing that I noticed. I noticed this through one of my own experiences in which really early on when I had gone out to a farm basically to take some time off, there was a lot of things going on in my life at the time and I just wanted to go and relax. I wasn't there really to learn, and I realized that the farmer had a different idea of what they expected. And depending on which farms you'd go to, you would have these different, some farmers would be, oh, you just work a few hours a day and then go do your thing and that's totally fine. And then some farmers would be like, you want 8 or 9 hours straight. And it was one of the things that I realized is that it's not always clear in some of these websites like woofing. You don't really always know what you're gonna get, and then it can create conflict. And it was something that I really picked up on a lot. I learned that urban centers are blossoming with agriculture programs to meet the needs of burgeoning interest in small-scale farming. A lot of the people who are in the cities are studying it and then wanting to start their own farms, and that many farms and farmers are looking to create better educational opportunities on their farms. And internships are also currently under the microscope. So these are kind of just some of the things that I'm going to talk about. So while running the City Farm School, I watched the interest in farming grow amongst those in and just out of university. Many people were attending these different workshops and speaking events and purchasing kind of a lot of different books and stuff that were coming out. And here's just some of the ones that became very popular around the time that I was doing it at the Market Gardener recently, the Urban Farmer, and that's Jean Martin's farm there out in the eastern townships of Quebec. So there's a large market for people who are interested in learning small-scale organic farming so that they can maximize their time and space in an urban or peri-urban setting. For most people who are interested in farming, the idea of purchasing acreage is pretty much completely out of the question. It is simply too expensive. Hence, most growers are focused on how to grow the most in the smallest spaces. So that was a lot of things that I learned, was that a lot of people aren't really even looking to be in the big scale. And so as farmers who are looking to try to attract people, even if they are operating something that is large scale, trying to think about how to kind of cater the experience for a volunteer or an apprentice, whatever this may be, to their farm is advantageous to attract people. One of those programs is the McVean program. It's located in Guelph. It's a peri-urban farm and also an incubator site. That allows for farmers to train and practice growing new crops. The Startup Farms program gives aspiring farmers small chunks of land to begin their careers with each year. And the land actually can keep expanding the longer that they are working on the project. Depending on a farmer's land holding, you may want to attract young farmers with the chance to have their own land the following year. This program, Farm Start, looks to partner with aspiring farms that may want to attempt their model, but frankly, I think any farm or group of farmers could create their own program. And at this McVean place, they also have a community garden. And so there is this, what's unique about this is it's convenient location just on the outskirts of town, so people can still live in the city. Flexible learning, so they offer different amounts of time you can do, 3 months intensive, weekends, full year. You get to receive your own plot to experiment in, which I think was probably, when I was doing the city farm, we did the first year, we didn't have people have their own plots. They just always showed up and worked on the larger project. But when we divided it up and gave it to them, there was way more interest from the farmers. They all, from the learning farmers, they wanted to be there. They would show up early. They'd almost never be late anymore. They would always be late before. We'd always be like 20 minutes late before they get there. But what we did is we said, look, you're going to have your own plots, and the first hour is going to be the time you work on that. So if you show up and miss that, that's your own business, you know, and you'll deal with it within your collective, kind of. And so we opened that up a little bit more, and I think that it really helped. So I'm seeing a lot of this, and when we first heard about that idea, it was from Linnea Farm. Do you guys know Linnea Farm? It's based out of Cortez. I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, so FarmStart is a really great website to go check out. It's I think it's mostly just in Ontario, but I think that the model is what's important, not necessarily the actual organization. And this one actually you pay to attend, which is $3,000 to take this program. So the Linnea Farm model, I knew a number of people who attended this while they were still actually hosting this program. It's now on hiatus. It's a large farm with a group of stewards tending to the land, and they created also a full 8-month-long educational experience with weekly classes, guest teachers, animal husbandry, CSA management, and personalized plots to experiment with. So they actually have the students live there in a large building. I think they were taking at that time about 12 to 15 different students, and they were teaching them a real massive scale amount of different things that you can think of. And the teachers were really great, all had like 20 plus years of experience. And they had the individual plots. They would bring in a lot of educators from outside to the farm. And then they decided to take a year off about 4 years ago and liked it so much that they never went back. I have
They did have workshops last summer.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, so I'll see if how it loads up here, but I can also talk about it even if it doesn't. But they have a beautiful website. So what they did do is they said, hey, we don't want these people living here all the time. We want peace and quiet. It was basically the gist I got of it. But they still do offer different kinds of workshops all the time. And they also have farm stays there. So you can actually go and stay in the building that once had the people living there.
Was there a cost to that?
Yeah, Linnea was around $3,000 when they had their program, 3,000 to 5,000, and they would be like a sliding scale, and they would kind of give bursaries. And this is a really beautiful space. It's something like 300 acres, and it's been part of it's like a land trust essentially that's been on Cortez for 100 years or something like that. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of show that. So they have the different workshops, and when I was looking, they have farm tours, but they were in some of the pictures I was looking at, they are doing kind of like blacksmithing. So the programs here, they have open market garden workshops, permaculture, farm stay, and then they're just an actual, productive farm as well. So the Craft is a network of, I went back to that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's hard to do it backwards.
Yeah, got it. So, Craft is a network of farms that work together to offer the best education possibilities. This is based in Ontario. As more and more young people are looking for the next step after woofing, they will be looking for programs such as this one. That's why it's becoming more and more popular. These models should be analyzed for farmers who are looking to attract motivated and dedicated individuals who will offer your farm a focused, aspiring farmer and trustworthy farmhand who will stick through the season and become a valuable asset to you and your farm. There's something like 3 dozen or 4 dozen of these. I wanted to go actually to the website to show it. There's just these different regions in Ontario where this organization has basically gone out and asked if farmers want to be part of this collective. And what's really cool about it is, so there's just a list of some of the farmers. This is just from one of the regions. But what they have is in these different regions, they'll have these different farms that are part of a network, and you can go and choose one that you want to have your main focus learning on, and you will end up doing all these different other farm visits out to all these other farms, or you can do it where you're at 2 months, 2 months, 2 months, 2 months, and get really like a compacted learning experience, which I think is a really cool model. So they're working together to set up the educational experience for you so that you can go in and say, I want to start at Connie's farm and learn about herbs in the first 2 months. I want to move over to Jim's farm and learn about bees. I want to end with animal husbandry and then CSA management or something. And you know, what they were kind of recognizing is that not every farm can always teach everybody everything, and why put that pressure on you when you can just team up and split, you know? And so they have some cool things. I think the next slide talks a little bit about the details of yeah, so it has a roster of dozens of farms, as I mentioned, and it offers the full season internship. These are just some of the requirements if you wanted to be a farm, for example. So you're coming forward and they're like, these are the things we really want you to do. And if you do, then you can join as part of this kind of collective. So a lot of the things that I think are really interesting that they are doing is getting into field trips and participates in panels. And so in my own experience, I don't know if anyone else feels this way, but one of the best ways to be learning about farming and gardening is to just go to other people's gardens and farms and see what they're doing. Like, you can just pick up stuff so fast, especially if they're doing new things. You just notice it right away because you're so used to your own routine, and then suddenly you show up at somebody else's and you're just like, wait, what are you doing with those chickens? And why do you have the goats there? And so that's one of the things that they demand, is that you're kind of moving about and experiencing different farms. Whole Systems Design is based out of Vermont, and this is it's focused on ecological design and permaculture. The person who runs it, his name's Ben Falk. He wrote a book recently called The Resilient Farmstead or something. I forget, I have it and I can't believe I can't remember it. But their main thing on this is design and build courses, weekend courses and 5-day-long courses. And what's kind of unique about it is that a lot of it's very focused, and people will come in and they will do a project from beginning to end, kind of in the same weekend or over the course of 4 weekends, so that a person really gets to understand that bigger picture, which I think is a lot of, you know, as the person said before, she wouldn't give out the recipe for the fertilizer. These things sometimes can mean a lot to somebody who's trying to start. And knowing those details is important, and seeing things from beginning to end really helps out a new person to, I mean, this is my own experience. When I just actually do something, actually build the greenhouse, then I actually know how to do it, instead of just kind of somebody telling me about it. And so Whole Systems Design, it's interesting because his farm has basically been built up on these workshops. You know, bring in 50 people and they'll put in just this whole new, you know, bunch of swales and rice fields. They grow rice there. It's I think the most northern climate, the hardiness zone of growing rice in North America at this place. Ben Falk's his name, but that's it for anyone here who's interested in permaculture design. That's one of the most incredible books that I've seen. It's only about 2 years old now, and it's extremely beautiful.
Where in Vermont?
It's in the northeastern kingdom, just outside of Greensboro, like in that area. Oh wait, no, he's more in, actually, that's not true. He's in kind of central Vermont, right in central Vermont. I was thinking of a different farm. Yeah, I've never actually been to it. I've had some friends. When I was living in Montreal, I went down to Vermont a lot, and we brought him up one time, and he spoke, and just talking about how to like build soil. He did a soil building workshop, but I didn't even know at that time that he was this like doing these massive $1 million scale ecological design projects for schools and stuff, and it's pretty fascinating how kind of big it's blown up for him. It's really nice, and it's like they have these huge, beautiful timber frame buildings that are their educational centers, and super expensive though, as all the permaculture stuff is. I find just way too expensive to attend. Oh no, my picture's gone over top. How to attract desirable interns and workers. I guess I've gone over a lot of this stuff, but teaming up and offering more than one experience, creating a detailed website, detailing the advantages of learning on your farm, and showcasing your curriculum. I think offering varied lengths of stay is really important for a lot of people, and anyone who's ever wanted to go volunteer knows that it's nice to be able to come and go, and the multi-farm connection, create housing for your guests, offering bikes, and being very clear about your expectations. So, I just wanted to point out that for a lot of people when trying to think about building curriculum, which we'll talk about in a second, it's like there's a lot of great websites out there that showcase what people are interested in already, and it's the Compost Education Center in Victoria. They host workshops every week for the entire year, basically, and that's a really great way to see what people are interested in learning, and what has become popular. So curriculum ideas. If you're looking to start a school farm, here are some just of the very basic ones that when we were doing the City Farm School that people were always really interested in, and we would ask them each year what would be the ones that you would want to know more about. And so, not everyone is going to be doing these things on the farm. That's why partnering with other people is great, but just kind of showing that there can be maybe 2 tiers to it. So there can be the basic farming practices that could be for somebody who's just introducing themselves to farming, who just wants to start out and learn the basics, maybe only come 2 days a week. Or maybe they want to take it to another level and be learning things more like advanced farm management, crop planning, record and data keeping. A lot of these things are what people are searching for in their maybe second year of learning, second year of internships. 5 or 10 years ago, people were more interested in maybe just getting out and having a basic experience on a farm, but now more and more when I've been talking to people, they want to know, what's the business aspect of it? How do I get insurance? And if farmers can be offering these things and showing, because that is a learning curve that the farmer did, and often one that is not very enjoyable and has a lot of bumps in the road. This can be something that is really important to highlight and to say, because it's not just about growing, planting things and harvesting things. It's about marketing. It's about your business plan, your distribution practices. Good way to plan a curriculum that we were doing when we were planning it a lot was, first of all, to look at what are the things that I'm going to be doing anyways. Like, what are just the actual day-to-day steps that are going to make my farm run regardless if someone was here? And map those out. Say, okay, in March I'm going to be doing this or whatever. In June I'm going to be having a little bit of extra spare time, so maybe that's when I'm going to build a fence. Start to look at it this way so that you can offer that curriculum to prospective students to say, here's the kind of things we're going to be doing over it. And once you have this, then you can start to plan it in. Because a big thing for a lot of farmers wanting to take on people onto their farm is to know that there's a good trade. They're going to give their time to teach, and they're going to get back by having someone who listened and properly did the task that they are needing them to do. I've worked on farms before where I had been there as a woofer where I didn't know very much at the time. A week or 2 in, where I'm just slaving, digging and doing all kinds of work for this person, knowing it. And then I simply asked them, it'd be really great if tomorrow we could do that. And I actually had somebody respond one time. They're like, yeah, but that's going to take me time to, tell you that. And it's going to take me away from being able to do something else. And I was just like, what's the point of me even being here then? I know how to dig. I knew how to dig before I got here. And so I think that's just, that's always kind of the danger, is just those expectations. And so part of planning your curriculum in advance and really being, if you're a farmer or even a gardener, I think it can be at many different scales, and being honest with yourself, saying, am I going to have time to do these things, before setting out, so that you don't start missing one after the other, which as somebody who ran a farm school before, I would see that happen. I would suddenly be arriving and needing to do so many things because pests were taking over. And then at the end of the day, I was like, I didn't even talk to them about, green manures or whatever. And, and maybe they didn't notice, but they always notice. They're always like, hey, what happened to that class? So breaking it down a little bit further and just looking at how much detail there is in just a simple thing like greenhouse management, raising the seedlings. It means soil mixes, watering, potting up. It means different kinds of trays. It means different kinds of watering systems. It can mean a lot of different things, the heat in the greenhouse. And greenhouse construction, like I mentioned before, growing tomatoes and cucumbers, different trellising considerations, really trying to show the ones that failed, the ones that you don't do anymore, kind of bringing those out, telling somebody it's best to actually pay for the quality, not to try to always use these cheap things that in a year from now are going to be degrading and you're going to need to redo it. So, and then talking about other forms like caterpillar tunnels, row covers, cold frames, etc. All these things are really good, and a farmer should be trying to really express them and let them know what are the different options, how much they might cost, by showing the actual true costs of trying to set these things up and where to maybe be sourcing a lot of these materials. So once you've established these different kinds of workshops, you can decide how you're going to teach it. At Linnea Farm, for example, they would have 2 days a week where the entire morning would be teaching. And then you would have the afternoon where you would be doing stuff in the field. And then you'd have your 1 day a week where you'd be allowed to work on your own plot. Whereas some other farmers will say maybe it's 1 hour every morning where they're going to go over the theory. Or maybe you're just going to work hand in hand with the farmer the entire day. And that's going to be, you're going to be learning by being with them all the time. Just another example of how you could break it up and have fun with it, being like Bees 101 and Bees 201, and thinking of the different things that you could be teaching. And letting someone know, or when you're being attracted to a class, knowing that it's going to be an introduction to bee husbandry with a total of 10 hours of instruction spread out over the course of the internship, so that people really understand, by the time I finish this, I'm not going to be a person who starts working with bees, but I might have a good enough feel where I could apply for an actual internship the following season. And so there's those big differences, and when people are going to come out and offer a lot of their time, and the farm is going to offer a lot of time, you really want to make sure you both understand what's going to be happening. There's a place in Vancouver called the Bee School. That is, for anyone who's interested, it was something that I just came across while I was putting up this that seemed like a pretty interesting project. Reading group. So reading groups were something we did at the City Farm School, and this was greatly enjoyed by all. We focused on the political aspect of farming primarily, and I think it can really invigorate an educator to get into discussions with their interns or apprentices. So we had actually picked out a bunch of readings that we had just come across from always being involved in education and being around farmers, and would give select readings, stuff that mostly could be found free online. And we would meet each week in a big semicircle, and certain people would lead each week the discussion with some questions to the entire group. And it really brought a lot of people together. And and also arguments happened too, which were good, because then it created new ideas and got people to think outside of the box. So we did kind of a combination of things that were actually just talking about farming, like the new organic grower, Ellie Coleman, and Permaculture 1 or whatever that is there. And then we would talk about things more political, such as maybe political ecology or Silent Spring. Who's here read these books? All of them? Only 2 of them for me. Housing for interns. I just kind of wanted to throw it in there. I don't think it needs to really be talked too much about, but letting people know in advance, or if you're going to go to a farm, finding out in advance what you're going to be doing. Are you going to be living in your tent for 2 months? Are you going to have your own? Or are you going to have your own room? I stayed at a place one time, and it was a basement with no windows. And I was just like, I literally, after 2 weeks, I was like, I just need to get out of here.
I think it's the touchiest thing.
Yeah.
There is an expectation of that, that they're totally going to be appreciated, and that they're going to have reasonable accommodation, and it's not always possible.
Yeah. So
some people's idea of reasonable is a lot different than others.
Yeah, and everyone has different standards. Just because you're on a farm doesn't necessarily mean you're totally comfortable with a composting toilet. You just might not be, and so it just depends. And I think it is important, and it's just, I don't know, obviously it's kind of like, I'm sure that most people are trying to think about this, but not everybody.
It's a good point to let people know what they're in for, though.
Yeah.
To clearly describe the accommodation.
Meals is one too that I didn't even really discuss, but that whole aspect is pretty interesting. Like, what meals are served, who is making them, are they going to recognize dietary restrictions, things along these lines. Like I've been at farms where I was expected to cook dinner 2-3 days a week, and just kind of like, okay, you know, I didn't know that before I got here, and I thought I would have more spare time. But so yeah, that is, I guess, another aspect is just food. And so how to get the word out? A good time for researching is obviously the winter. And so here's just a couple different places to get this information out where I often see it. See it a lot on goodwork.ca. But the Canadian Young Farmers Forum is another good one. A lot of information on that. And another thing that I found also was in terms of setting up posting for your program, doing so usually in December before Christmas is often good, and giving them a timeline and some updates, and possibly having people subscribe just so that they know when it's coming, because the window that you probably are going to, for those who are going to want to host, is going to be fairly short so that you're not constantly trying to track it. So it's good to let people know in advance. Does your farm cost money? So depends on the kind of program you're going to be offering. If it's going to be casual, then maybe it's just you're simply coming and that's that. Or maybe it's going to be more formal. And so here was just some of the different programs that I was talking about. I didn't talk about the bottom one there, but just trying to show how expensive some of these programs are getting right now in the urban setting for people to do trainings, $5,000. So, which I think that with the raising of a lot of these costs, a lot of people will be looking to go out and just to do a simple internship where they don't have to pay. I was thinking of doing this at first with some of the legalities that I came across while doing it that I think were interesting because they don't exist in Quebec and Montreal, where I was living prior. Quebec and Ontario. So internships are defined as hands-on training as part of a formal educational program called a practicum in the Act. Internships that provide training for certain professions such as architecture, law, chiropractic, and engineering and real estate. So I'll just show you the different terms here, but as per BC's Employment Standards Act, unpaid internships are actually technically illegal unless the internships falls under one of the two narrow exceptions listed on the website. And I'll talk about how there's actually been a contestation of it from a couple years ago. Just a further definition. In essence, an internship can only be considered so if they are receiving constant on-site training. It can be quite confusing and therefore is important that all farmers visit the Employment Standards Act. But even with looking at these different things, they have internship, apprentice, practicum, blah, blah, blah. There was all these different ways of discussing what it was, and it can get pretty confusing when there hasn't been very much of people contesting this, but there was an example in Cowichan from 2 years ago that I'm going to talk about. But I think the big thing for it to actually become more legal is that you are offering a certificate or diploma, and that there is more of a hands-on. So I think that the days of kind of a lot of the farmers just catching a lot of free labor is kind of coming to an end. And really, it's not a great model for anyone to be running their business anyways, where they require all kinds of free hands to do it. It's often a time where someone needs to perhaps start looking at their business model. Okay. So the practicum is part of a formal education process for students enrolled in a public or private post-secondary institution that involves the supervised practical application of previously classroom-taught theory. So this is kind of where one of the differences in UBC Farm, as an example, even though the farm is actually located on campus, when it's a practicum and when you have a relationship that can be with a school, some sort of institution, then it becomes considered more legal because it's part of a program. So linking two education centers in order to run your program, which seems like a big deal, obviously it would be, but maybe if you were to do some of the, like what I was mentioning earlier, the craft kind of model where they are partnering with each other, so you get a group of farmers together, then maybe approaching a school in order to create a program that results in a diploma would allow it to become technically legal. Almost done here. So there was a recent contestation, and although very rare, contesting the terms of an internship have come to the court of law. And this particular ruling happened here on Vancouver Island less than 3 years ago. There was a couple this is such a peculiar relationship that they had, but there was a couple who had approached another couple to buy their land, and they said, okay, we can do that. They were a couple that were kind of retired at this point. I think they were in their 60s. And they had come and said, but part of us wanting to buy your land is that we will want to internship to understand how to, they'd never farmed before, basically. And so they were just wanting to get into this like as a retirement thing. And so they started doing it, and then basically about midway through the year, they realized that the work was just more than they were going to be ready to start getting into. And they had an issue with how, even though they were doing an internship and being paid a stipend plus food, they wanted to be paid the same rate that these blackberry pickers who were coming onto the land to pick. And this is where this argument started. And they ended up leaving and then serving a notice of a lawyer to basically go to court. And there was nothing that the farmer actually could do, and they had to pay retroactive salaries of upwards of $20,000. I think it was off the record, but that's what they were looking for. So this is was the first of its kind, and still from what I saw in my research, there is no other examples of this around here, but in BC, but it's just to say that this is something that is realistic, but it came out of a relationship that seemed strange anyways. So it's very different than most of the other ones that I've seen. So just want to say thanks to anybody if you have any questions. And here's just some Alberni Valley Transition Town Society website there, and we're also on Facebook and Food Security Hub. So that's like what we're working with. We're a hub in Port Alberni, and there's also my email there. And I brought a sheet if anybody wanted to come and sign these sheets. So you can. I just put name and email for anyone who is a farmer or interested in being a learner on any of these. If they wanted to come up and sign this, I could put you in contact after. Or if there's any farmers in here who are thinking, this could be interesting, I'd like to connect with other people in and around the region, feel free to come up and give me any information on this piece of paper. Does anybody have any questions? Any thoughts on anything you saw in there? No? Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I just want to say, I do think that it is one of the more difficult things to deal with, in the fact that you don't have all the money that you need to pay all the people you need to really get your farm where you want to.
Mm-hmm.
So you look for alternatives, and you're looking for apprentices. But I really would be concerned with anybody starting up to start up now in that model.
Yeah.
I think that you need to consider a model of partnerships or some other system, because I think that as the government becomes more interested in what's happening in the farming world, which we're seeing happening now,
Mm-hmm.
here, that they're going to look at that, and they'll want to, when they do, it's going to be actually part of their business.
Yeah, it's, when I'm looking at this and kind of researching and preparing this presentation, it's just phenomenal how much our foods suppliers and producers rely on volunteer hours, and like what other, you look around, you don't see that happening, volunteer garbage collectors and volunteer mechanics, I can't wait to get in there and do 40 hours a week volunteering a mechanic, you don't, and it's unbelievable that food is this one whole industry that, organic in particular, where people are needing to do this, needing to bring in all kinds of extra labor, and just to not even make that much money, even with it, people are still on the lower end of these, pay scale, and it's it really says something about that. It's true. Thank you, everyone.